To the latest edition of The Six. And I know if you're taking a look at us today, we are two. We are
Yes.
having some scheduling.
Math is not mathin'.
No, math is not mathing, as Nancy says. So we are going to, one, ask for some questions today. So if you're hanging out with us today and you have some questions, please ask. Or just reach out to any of the six of us. And the six of us are Robin Flaherty from Benefit Link, who is on with me today, me, Allison DePauli from Altique Consulting, Liz Antaya, Christine Shear, Pat Isaac, and Nancy Giacalone. So I imagine if you're here, you know one of us. So reach out, ask us your questions, because we're dying to answer things. And we also want to know what you want answered, not just what we want to tell you. But today,
although as women, we love that too, but
we do. But today we are going to talk about what we wish our clients would ask us in the new year. I think lots of things are changing in our world. They're continuing to change. You know, the gag clause attestation just went into effect. That may only be important to nerds like Robin and I, but it is ultimately really important to your health plan. So Robin, why don't you kick us off? What do you want your clients and your prospects to ask you?
It's not so much ask, but be curious about the system and feel that it is possible to understand it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we all need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's the only way we're going to learn about the system, which we know well and we take for granted how much we know it. And I know myself, I have a blind spot when I'll start talking to somebody. And I always, thankfully, now I'm aware of the glaze. They just start glazing over. And I realize, okay, I need to change the narrative here and,
Yes.
maybe present it in a different way. I know that's a huge blind spot that I have. So I think that the question that I would want clients to ask is, how do we fix this? And really be determined in the resolve that we can together. It's very cool. So have you ever heard about the different estates? Like the first estate is clergy, the second estate is noblemen, the third estate is the commoners, and the fourth estate is the media, right?
Yep.
And so we're the third estate, right? But something magical happens when all of the third estate gets together and agrees. We actually become the second estate, nobility. We become in charge. And that's how I see things. So I wish my clients would say, I want to be engaged and show me how. And I know that deep down they want to be, but I just think that's been so many years of confusion. And I think we're always so busy untangling the messes and serving our clients that it's kind of like working on your business instead of in your business, right? Or excuse me, working in your business, not on your business. So it's kind of like that. I think sometimes we work in the healthcare system so much that we don't have a lot of time to work on the healthcare system.
I wish for several things, but one of the things that I would wish for is that when the executive team gets the health insurance renewal, that they would not go, that again, just get it to budget and move on.
Well, that's a good point.
And know that there are the things that you can do. And one of the things that I think that the change agents in this industry, and we're those, right, have not done a great job of is allowing people to change at their own pace, right? Because sometimes maybe you're just going to do this one thing, and then maybe that will lead you to do another thing, but you think that you're failing because you're not doing all the things, or all the things are too scary to you. You don't have to do all the things at one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can just do one thing at a time, and that might be all that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's okay to do just one thing. It's right. It's small incremental steps.
Yes.
It's not big epic moments. It's the little things. It's the slow and steady, pace that wins the race.
Yep. And I think that is a really important thing to talk about, is the pace of change. And I know it's New Year's and people are making all kinds of New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I've always been amazed that when I chose one thing to do, maybe two, those things got done. And when I chose 10, nothing happened.
Yeah. Agreed.
So we have some friends. So Riley is here and Andrew McFarland seems to be here. So if you have any questions for us, or Andrew, if you would like to share your latest Can't Make This Up story, we would love to hear it because we probably have some commentary about that. So have you been reading his Can't Make This Up?
No, but I love that. Can't make this. I say that all the time. You know, I'm constantly saying I cannot make this up.
Yes. I had the most remarkable call with a potential client this morning. She reached out to me.
Nice.
And she said, I said, so, you know, she came from an organization that we belong to. I went there, I found you, we're here in your town. And she did not like, she had met with a big box broker and she did not like, and has met with several, and she did not like what they had to say. She felt that her questions made them very uncomfortable. And she didn't want that. She wanted to be able to ask what she wanted to ask, including how much we got paid, what kind of bonuses we got from our vendors. And she is the only client that has ever come out and asked me that directly. And I thought that was fantastic.
That's great that there's finally an awareness. Yeah, that's great.
Oh. Yep. So Nick is here and he says, any advice on how to make the suggestion that the C-suite finally bring the HR team into the C-suite? And I have something to say about that, but Robin, you get to go first.
I'm sorry. Would you repeat that? I was getting the sun out of my eyes. My apologies. About how to, so basically making HR strategy.
Pulling them into the C-suite. So any advice on how to make the suggestion that the C-suite finally bring the HR team into the C-suite?
You know, that's a culture. That's a culture decision. And so, you know, I think that there's definitely data that can be accumulated and presented for the argument of why HR should have a seat at the table, because, you know, when you have the right data assembled, I think that then the numbers and the information speaks for itself as a support as to why this person should be involved in certain levels of decision making. And I know that's probably not a real specific answer because I don't have any data examples, but I do know that there are systems out there that can look at data throughout the employee life cycle and be in a position to provide information illustrations, you know, that can be used for better decision making.
I think that goes to the larger data question, right? I think the best advice that I ever had came from a CEO, and it was start with the leader of HR, whatever that title is, because you know it has 18 different titles. You can be the VP of HR, you can be the CHRO, you can be the Chief People Officer, you can be, I don't know, 29 other things. So whoever the head of HR is, start with that person, go to the CFO, make the argument to the CFO, or go to the CFO and bring the HR person into that conversation. And then the people and the money go to talk to the CEO, because then you have both sides of the coin. And I think what Nick is getting at, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you don't bring HR into the conversation about changing benefits, you are handicapping yourself, because HR are the people that have to deliver the change. And if they don't like it, or they don't agree with it, or they don't understand it, they cannot and maybe will not do that effectively.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And I think that's kind of where you can get into some trouble. I mean, you know, CEO and CFO are going to do this, and HR is like, oh yeah, no, without fully understanding the why or the how and what the impact is to the employees. And I think that those of us that do this well and often have robust conversations about where the roadblocks are and how to solve the roadblocks. There is no conversation that should go, oh, this is easy and it's no problem. The execution may be easy, but the consequences have to be understood. And there can be great consequences, but it's change.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have anything else that you think about that?
I think you're spot on with that, because you're right. They are the first line of defense. And, and then I think you also have that element of, just circling back on your comment about HR needs to be involved, because they're the ones that will really internally, they're the champions that are implementing this, is that, nobody wants noise, right? So, we could circle back actually to the initial question of what are the couple things you can do to affect change. So obviously start with the noiseless change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the noiseless changes that we could make, that again, you've got the one or two things that could be impactful, don't have to do everything.
Yes.
So
And I think start with one.
Yeah. Start with one and make it a noiseless one, so that you're gaining that, you're building that momentum and excitement that this change is possible, so that when the noise changes happens, everyone can be in the right mindset to navigate through it, because they understand really what's at stake and why it's important that we go through this noise to reach the other side.
Before we move on to the next question, I have a question for you. So early in my evolution of working in sort of the non-traditional or the more employer-controlled benefit space, there wasn't a lot of conversation with employees about why these changes were being made. There was a lot of, we don't want to talk about it. We just want to make some changes, and we don't want to discuss sort of the why behind the change. And over time, I have found that when you tell people why, and I'm going to give you an example in a second, you get much more buy-in. And the example I'm going to give you is about pharmacy, because that's one of the easiest changes to make, right? You can really impact a plan by 10 or 20% a year, every year, by just having a responsible, never mind truly 100% transparent, all the bells and whistles, but just a reasonably responsible pharmacy partner will buy you 10 to 20% premium savings because of the way that they buy their drugs from their pharmacies, right? So we did an example this year for several of our clients where we took three of the most common drugs and showed them what they cost at different pharmacies. And there was audible gasp. And now people are going to the least expensive pharmacies, and they're not fighting it. They understand why. Now they got something in return, which was no premium increase. Plan stayed the same, no premium increase. And it's a give and take, right?
And I think employees are becoming a little savvier. And it's interesting you bring up pharmacy, because that is the low hanging fruit, because a company can resource their drugs and, to your point, save a significant amount of money. But also, too, I just think that with the high deductible plans being the only, plans that a lot of employers can afford to put in place, I'm talking fully insured right now, or even partially self-funded. I think employees are now seeing that you've got those different options out there. You have the negotiated rate through your health plan. You have GoodRx. You have Cost Plus Drugs. A lot of these larger grocery chains have their own discount cards now.
Yep.
So I think, and I know we talk about it in our education meetings, and I love always hearing the different examples of the savings. So I do think that people are starting to become more aware. What's happening in our neck of the woods is we've got a very large urgent care that's pulling out of the Blues network.
Oh.
And, but what's exciting about this is I almost see this as the beginning of more of these issues that are really going to, I feel bad for the inconvenience to the members, but I think that it's going to force the issue of being aware that you need to know who's in network, who's not. And then I think also, too, when someone pulls out of the network, I think that it creates not only an awareness, but a curious curiousness or curiosity of, well, why? Why are they pulling out? And then they can peel back that onion a little bit to see, well, what were the factors that led up to and contributed to this ultimate decision? Because in that trail, if you will, is a lot of really good nuggets of information of how the system works, which ultimately is important to really tie together all of the really good transparency laws that have been, put in place over the last few years. Because I do believe that ultimately the transparency laws are really is what is going to be the catalyst for the consumer market that ultimately we're going to see within the next decade. My prediction is going to
I
take.
think it's going to take a good 5 to 10 years before
Yes,
this
absolutely.
gets its feet firmly planted.
But I think there's going to be these little things along the way
Yeah.
that we'll be able to look back in 5, 7, 10 years and say, that's where it started. It was this that led to this, that led to that. So sorry, go ahead. You had something. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. So Dale Sagan is asking, how does AI and other technologies impact jobs in HR and jobs that benefits firms in 2024? I think quite a lot, actually. I think that people are going to get to do the fun parts of their job again, and the stuff that nobody likes to do is thankfully going to be automated. And we will have to be better users of AI and technology, and we will sink or swim that way.
Yeah. One thing I'm really excited about with AI is I think that it is going to allow for complicated decisions to be made very easily, because I think that those systems are going to be able to hold a lot of information and be able to sort through the sample size. Like, for example, my ideal world is where you've got AI helping you pick a health plan because you have been using a system to pay for your claims. So the system knows what you've used. The system knows your healthcare expenses. It can run some quick math behind the scenes on, okay, well, here's the best plan for you for this coming year based on your prior usage and based on this benefit structure and this, these premiums. Here's the plan you should choose for the coming year.
So I see how that works with a little bit of a larger employer, but how do you think that impacts the smaller employers? And I think the average size employer is 19 employees in the United States. And that one of the challenges with a group of 19 is you never know where the risk is coming from, right? Your high utilizer this year is not going to be your high utilizer next year. So, that's how we got community rating, because then you can manage a large block, right? So how do you manage that for a 19 life employer? Because their risk is often not the same one year from the next.
Right. So I think that's where this system that I dream of, I think is going to be available for any size company. Because, like, for example, you talk about the community pool here in Rochester, New York, between the two carriers, there's like 70 options. How can you choose, right? So that it's our job to go through those, sort through those, bring the handful of plans that fit into the low, medium, high, or the good, better, best bucket. But then still from there, employees have, so we can choose it for the employer based on our knowledge level and running some calculations on which plans are the best relative to the premium, the total financial risk, the deductible out-of-pocket maximum, co-insurance. But ultimately, then the employee still needs to make their decision between the good, better, best. And that's what I'm talking about, is I think that AI will help these employees once they're connected into the system, if you will. I think that AI is going to help employees not be over or underinsured.
And that's a real challenge, right? And I notice, risk averse people tend to be wildly overinsured, and risk takers tend to be wildly underinsured.
Yeah, right.
Which both are problematic. So Andrew, I love this. Show me the data. Getting it from the carriers is brutal. True.
Mhm.
Broker has to have it to evaluate and make recommendations. Vendor solution partners need it to produce accurate reports for the employee or to continue conversations with said broker. How best to, pardon the pun, Robin, mitigate the flow of communication data exchange between all parties?
So, so I think, let me think. I just had a thought, but I ate lunch late. So now
You ate toast.
so I know it probably wasn't enough. So, ask me that question again. Sorry. Let me ask you that.
How do you manage the data conversation? How do you,
Well, okay. Yeah.
between the carrier and the broker and the carrier and the employer?
Okay. So you're right. It's not a perfect world yet, where, even though we have these transparency laws where the data is flowing, and remember, HIPAA was never designed for the blocking of free flow of information. It was designed for the proper dissemination of information. So that said, if you think about it, and this circles back to an earlier comment about employees being engaged and understanding why, and that makes for a very successful change, is that the employees have the data. So if we can engage them and help them understand that your identity is safe, your information safe, but we need you to free flow and help fill some gaps where we're having a hard time getting information from the vendors that have it. If you can fill the gaps with employees, if you can build the trust with the employees, then you can fill those gaps and finish that picture, have a complete picture. Because the employees have the data, right? If you think about the data, it's in two places. It's in the hands of the employees, the user, and it's in the hands of the administrator.
Right.
And if the administrator is not doing what they're supposed to, or you don't have the right contracts in place to get the information, or they're just stalling because no answer is an answer, right? We see that a lot in our industry. They don't say yes, but they don't say no, but the end result is no.
Nothing.
Right. You can fill those gaps with building a trusting relationship with the employee. And to your point earlier, helping them understand what's in it for them.
And I think that's very important. There does have to be something in this for employees. And I think as employees start to figure out, well, why is this way? Why is this that way? And they start asking and getting their questions answered, they become more of a partner.
It's interesting. So Nancy's saying most employees will come back with a hard no on that. Nancy, I agree with you. No, Nancy, I agree with you that is almost the obvious answer. But I will tell you, I had a situation once where I had a group of about 200 employees and we were doing their HRA. And I thought for sure that the employees would not want us to, give us permission to go into their site and get their information. These people threw their information at us to do it for them. And you know what I mean? So go ahead.
They threw their information at you. They didn't throw their information at their employer.
Oh, of course. But and I apologize if anyone missed this comment earlier, as I mentioned that there's a trusted person who's the intermediary. It's not, of course, the employer. Oh my gosh. No, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing if we ever made that mistake, right? No, of course, it's not going to be the employer that they're going to give it to. It's going to be us. It's going to be the trusted third party administrator.
Yeah. Yes. I think that is an important thing. We are,
I'm sorry, Nancy, you're having that problem. You can't get it. Yeah.
You know what? It's a real thing. We have a client
company by company. Yeah.
Yeah. We have an employer that is making some mandatory prescription changes that will hugely benefit the employee, but the employees have expressed in survey after survey that they do not want the employer knowing what prescriptions they're taking. So we've had to completely pull the HR team out of that process, and which is fine. That's what we do, right? But it was a very interesting. We had to do some very interesting things to accomplish that. Trust is a real thing with employers and employees, and you do have to respect that if you want to gain more of it.
Yeah, of course. Well, it is the new currency.
Yeah. So Nick has another question.
Yeah.
Is there a resource for both employers and consultants on what a correctly completed 5,500 should look like? Lots of disparity out there. Yeah. Lots of disparity.
Yeah, I think that questions was correctly completed.
5,500.
Yeah. So I think, an ERISA attorney is a good place to turn. Yeah. I guess I would want to know, when you say there's lots of disparity, in what way? Nick, what in what areas are there? I mean, you've got the filing requirement, and then you've got the form, and then the Schedule A comes from the administrators. Yeah, for the carriers or the third-party administrators. So
let me add on to that question. Maybe the 5,500. I think the 55 for me, the 5,500 form is the 5,500 form, right? We get a Schedule A from every applicable entity. We get that completed for employers. I think the real key is the compensation disclosure. And not only the compensation, yes, here's the number, here's the number, here's the number, but what the number means. Because we've seen plenty of contracts where the fee to the consultant is a percentage of savings, but I don't think that most employers understand how that number is derived and might be very surprised at what they're paying, what they're actually paying. I think the comp disclosure is more important than the Schedule A, because the Schedule A only ever has the base level of comp in it anyway. There's none of the things, right? None of the bonuses and the retentions and the blocks and the marketing and the whatever other fee you want to have in there. They're not in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with Nancy's comment. That's why we use a trusted compliance vendor. Absolutely. I wouldn't do my own. I wouldn't do 5,500s. Actually, I've done them in the past, back in my old career, and that's why I don't do them anymore.
So Nick fleshed out his question. An example being a 200 life group with a 470,000 premium reported and a broker comp of $2,000. Yeah, that's probably not quite right, but that might be the only commission, and then the rest is fee based, and that doesn't have to be on necessarily have to be on a comp disclosure.
Yeah,
or a broker or a 5,500. It does need to be on a comp disclosure. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like the Schedule A is not right.
That's what it sounds like to me as well. I want to go back to that data conversation. There are more data analytics solutions that are external to the health plan. And some of them are innocuous enough that you can get good information, but they don't seem to disturb the traditional carriers. And you would get de-identified information, but what you can do is pull reporting out of that so that you can see what your drug costs are, you can see what your medical costs are, you can see where you're higher than whatever benchmark you choose. And for the good ones, you can choose a half a dozen benchmarks. You can choose employers of your size, employers in your geography, employers in your industry, and you can see where you stand and where the things are that you should attack. And while that is not necessarily enough for an underwriter, it is a good place for an employer to start. And if you've got that going, you can probably get some more claim information also. Round out the picture with the more specifics that you need.
Well, and remember, there's the alternative data analytics as well, right? People are looking at credit reports. And I remember one time I was at a conference and they were saying that they can even interpret some demographics based on the color car people drive. You know, it's just like stuff like that. Yeah.
The red cars.
Yeah. Well, or white cars or so let's see here. And what penalties exist if a plan that was required sales? Yeah, it's some ridiculous amount of money per day that I don't have off the top of my head, but I do know that the IRS is a benevolent dictator. So I think that, they usually, I think if you realize it quickly and cure the situation and go to them, I think that the outcome is a lot better than them finding you.
Yes. And I want to flesh that out just a little bit. I have a client that we had to fix, and let me see if I can't find it. They had never filed a standard form, and they have about 300 lives on the plan, and the fix was a $1,500 penalty, and then filing all of the applicable forms and then making sure that they were okay moving forward. There is a break in, I believe, 2019, and the penalty used to be $100 a day per eligible employee with a not a horrible max, a $15,000 or $25,000 annual max. And I literally am pulling this out of my head, so we have to go back and check. And then in 2020, the penalty changed and it became a 10x penalty. So the penalties for years 2020 onward were 10 times what they were before 2019 and before. So it is really worthwhile to just go and say, we screwed up. We're going to pay this penalty.
Yeah.
We're going to fill out all this stuff.
Yeah.
If you're caught, there is no mercy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just go get it fixed and move forward. It's not, once you get in the groove, it's not hard. And your advisor, I don't think advisors should be filling out 5500s. I do think that there should be a compliance service for that, along with all of the other compliance needs should be part of that. But they can help make sure it gets done. And that is their role, not necessarily to fill out the form, but to make sure that it gets filled out.
We do that. Yeah, we make sure that all of the dots are connected. The compliance dots get connected properly. Yeah, one that gets missed from my vantage point is the PCORI return. Lots of brokers. I actually saw an email once from a prospect where the broker said, well, that's not our area of responsibility. I was like, wow. So yeah, it is your area. It's your area of responsibility from an awareness standpoint.
Correct.
It's not your area of responsibility from an actual filing and create your, or not so much filing, but preparation standpoint. It's not your preparation responsibility, but it is your
responsibility to notify
and awareness and subsequent filing responsibility.
Yes. And I know the six of us, we all do things a little bit differently, but we all seem to have a compliance checklist that provides an employer with, okay, these are the things that are happening through the course of the year. We keep people on track, but some of these things an employer must do him or herself. And we feel that it is our role to facilitate that, but employers do need to be responsible for their plan management. And to get an answer like, well, that's just not our responsibility. That's great, except what's your employer supposed to do, because they don't live in our world.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of that with the gag clause attestation. I had a general counsel from a rather large TPA call me and say, we work with hundreds of brokers. Why are you the only one that I'm hearing this from? And I was like, well, I can't answer that, but I need to know this question. And you know what? There was one very small issue that our compliance consultant had with a contract, and they changed it. They were like, oh, could we just say this instead? And she said, yes, you could just make this one sentence amendment. And they were like, oh yeah, done, no problem. It's having a conversation.
Yeah, that's so crucial. It's starting having that conversation. Changes everything.
Changes everything, and it takes time. And this was a relatively, because she's ACDP. We love you, Andrew, in case you didn't know that. I think that's to me, that's our role, is to manage the change and help people work through the change and get what it is that they need and make their plan perform the way they want it to perform. But that's a whole lot of conversation, right?
It is.
I think if nobody has any other questions for us, we are going to wrap it up. I'm going to close with what I wish clients would ask for, which is data and how do we make this better for their employees? And that question we actually get answered a lot. You have anything to add, Robin?
Well, of course, I have my own hopes for this industry before I retire, which I'm hoping is another 15 years. But yeah, I just, I'm always beating the shifting power from the classes to the masses drum. And so, yeah, I just, it's funny. I don't know if I have any wishes that my clients would ask me per se, but just having that willingness. And to your point, you said earlier that, that was a really good point about, getting the renewal and just saying, oh, let's just get through this, right? There's some stats out there that employees would rather go through, would rather get their taxes done now than go through open enrollment, right? And they would rather sit in the dentist chair for an hour than go through open enrollment. It's like, how terrible is this? But really, open enrollment doesn't have to be that painful. But I just think, again, it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortableness. And there's certainly the right transparency laws in place now that we can take this industry to a consumer industry. And I believe it's happening slowly but surely. And I predict a decade, it's going to be very, very different in 2034. And so I just hope that I guess I wish my clients would be open to moving this as fast as we can.
I think that is a great wish for 2024. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we will see you next time.